It was sweet to watch two lovebirds perched on a tree, enjoying the warm summer sun. Miss Chang had been endlessly searching for true love for her daughter, spending money on marriage agencies, yet every date she went on ended in failure. Soo-bin grew frustrated with the expenses for each date and urged her mother to think practically. The girl felt deeply hurt, regretting the wasted money, but her mother was determined not to repeat the same argument again. The girl's anger escalated, insisting the matchmaking attempts stop. The girl said that it would indeed be the last time. Shoved toward the door in her mother's fury, she tripped slightly on the threshold, barely catching herself from falling. As she walked down the street, she muttered her frustration over her mother's relentless behavior and the tteokbokki stall in that God-forsaken place. She continued walking, weighed down by sadness and anger. Despite repeatedly telling her mother she wasn't interested in marriage, her feelings were ignored. At first, she barely noticed her surroundings, but gradually, she saw blooming gardens and bright sunshine. The lovely weather lifted her spirits as she strolled, appreciating the scenery around her. Arriving at the restaurant for her date, she met a friendly-looking man, introduced as the eldest son of the Jonga Jeep family. They started chatting. She smiled as he described living with his parents and his desire for a future wife who would handle housework rather than pursue a career. He explained that his parents had worked hard their whole lives, and as the eldest son, he hadn't been able to help them much. He expressed his wish to ensure his parents' comfort in retirement, and she listened politely, acknowledging his perspective. He inquired about her father's health, and she quietly admitted he hadn't been doing well. Soo-bin revealed that her father had been in a serious car accident 3 years ago, and the man seemed to take her words to heart. He asked if she was the only one supporting her family, which caught her off guard, leaving her silent as she sipped her drink. Setting her glass down, she listened as he asked about the size of her restaurant. She explained that it wasn't big at all, just a tiny snack shop selling tteokbokki near a school in a building she rented. She added that she had to pay rent and only earned from sales. He expressed that he understood. He asked if she really planned to continue living with her parents, noting that it was a little confusing. Then he smiled and explained that it didn't mean he didn't like her. In fact, she was his type, and he thought he had fallen for her at first sight. She froze, unsure how to respond. Soo-bin explained that as an only child, she had no siblings, so she needed to live with her parents, and she also wanted to continue working and earn a promotion. She didn't like his words and rose slightly from her seat, expressing fear that they weren't meant to be and wishing he would find someone nice. She laughed awkwardly and tried to leave, but he stopped her, clearly showing that he really liked her. The man pleaded with her not to dismiss it so quickly and urged her to think it over, noting that a woman becomes part of her husband's family when she marries. He insisted that she couldn't take care of her parents forever. He added that she already faced enough problems and questioned whether parents with only one daughter weren't prepared for retirement. She interrupted, showing that she didn't like the idea. He offered to move closer to her parents' place if she wanted, but she shook her head. He tried to continue, but she politely apologized, saying she had done her best to be respectful. The conversation bothered her, and looking him in the eye, she coldly asked whether he always followed double standards. He tried to defend himself, saying that if she valued her parents, she needed to realize that he valued his as well. Pointing her finger at him, she shouted that he was only a good son in words. Furious, the girl screamed that he should treat his parents better, calling him a brat. Without waiting for her response, he ran off. She shouted that he could never stop caring for her parents and angrily tossed ice cubes into her mouth, crunching them in frustration. Then she tried to calm herself, thinking that it would be fine and that she shouldn't let men get to her like this. Running her hands through her hair, she realized that her personality was strong and not easy to deal with. She stepped outside and saw it was raining. Opening her umbrella, she wondered what was going on with the sudden weather. She walked a long way under the pouring rain, lost in thought about what to say to her mother. The downpour was so heavy that she barely noticed other people nearby, A woman stood over her child with a jacket to shield them from the rain, likely heading toward a nearby supermarket. Seeing the woman, Soo-bin remarked on how hard it was raining. The woman agreed, noting how suddenly the weather had changed. Soo-bin watched the little child hiding under the jacket. She insisted that the woman take her umbrella to avoid getting soaked, despite the woman's polite refusal. The woman thanked the girl and carried her child through the heavy rain while the girl waved after them. The rain was relentless. She covered her head with her hand and ran down the street, trying to reach home quickly. In her hurry, Soo-bin didn't notice a man standing in the rain with an umbrella. Bumping into him startled her, but he noted that she hadn't changed a bit. She couldn't see his face clearly and panicked, swinging her fists as if he were a thief or a goblin. The man stood there, surprised at how scared she looked, and introduced himself as Ji Ye-Jun. Noting that it had been a long time since they last met, he added that they still had unfinished business. She reacted angrily, scolding him for appearing like a ghost and scaring her. He shot back that she was still as nasty as ever. The girl yelled at him furiously, insisting that no one had claimed she had a nasty personality, telling him to look at himself. She accused him of not coming there just to see her face, and he admitted that she was correct. She stood silently in the rain, staring at him, and completely lost for words. He reminded her of the money she had borrowed 10 years ago and explained that he was there to collect it. After pausing to observe her standing drenched, he suddenly proposed marriage. She was shocked. His proposal hit her like a bolt of lightning, leaving her frozen as raindrops streamed down her face. The girl stood looking at the man, who was waiting for her response. She was so surprised that she asked him what he had just said. Ye-Jun asked if her parents were doing well. She confirmed that they were fine and thanked him. He then asked about her shop, and she told him it was fine as well. He mentioned that he wanted to talk to her alone and suggested going somewhere to sit. The girl said she didn't want to talk alone and asked if it was really urgent, suggesting they could discuss it another time. She explained that it wasn't about avoiding the conversation about the debt, but that she wasn't feeling well at the moment. He, however, silently walked away. She tried to stop him, but he ignored her, so she chased after him and told him she would go with him. Soo-bin caught up with him and asked how he could leave someone soaking in the rain when he had an umbrella. She tried to talk to him, but he gestured for her to come closer so they could share the umbrella and stay out of the rain together. Her mood improved, and she smiled, teasing him that he was still such a stick in the mud. He looked at her strangely, and then joked that her face was still kind of ugly. He stayed quiet and didn't react to her anger, even when she said he annoyed her. But they continued walking together. A few days earlier, he had met with his father, who told him that this was his last chance. That was why he proposed marriage to the girl. His father had given him a month to get married, warning that if he didn't, he would marry the woman his father chose. He told his father he had never intended to marry. His father became very angry, pounding the table and yelling that he was ungrateful for everything his father had done. His father said that if he didn't marry, he shouldn't even dream of inheriting the company. The man felt upset hearing this, but his father added that in a month he would take away everything he lived for and loved. Ye-Jun asked if it was because he wasn't his biological son. His father replied that he could never repay all the kindness he had been given. His father also mentioned that his grandmother had no more than 6 months left to live, and told him to think carefully about what he had been offered. When he entered the restaurant with the girl, he couldn't stop thinking about his father's words and the urgency to get married as soon as possible. The girl asked what was going on and what he wanted to talk about. He suggested they get married, but she was very stubborn. She panicked and shouted that it would never happen, repeating this for the last time. Despite her hysterics, the man calmly repeated that they should get married, while she insisted she didn't want to marry. Soo-bin accused him of joking, but he insisted he was serious. She yelled that he had gone crazy, yet he remained completely serious about the proposal. She said it didn't sound right and that marriage wasn't a joke, but he suggested marrying for just 1 year and that he would forget about her debt. Soo-bin calmed down a bit and listened carefully, and he proposed that they pretend it never happened afterward. He reminded her that she didn't have a stable income, and since she said marriage wasn't a joke, he tried to convince her. The girl accused him of thinking he could play with people's feelings just because he was rich. He told her not to react so emotionally. He pointed out that, in any case, she wasn't really interested in getting married. She was surprised and asked him to clarify. Putting his coffee cup on the table, the man asked why she was sabotaging all the blind dates if she really didn't want to marry. He asked if her parents knew she didn't want to marry, still trying to persuade her. She asked if he had tried to find information about her, thinking his behavior was unacceptable. Ye-Jun said she shouldn't have expected him to come unprepared, explaining that he wasn't the type of person to act without preparation and assumed she knew him better than others. The girl thought he was right, since she had known him since childhood and knew his unbearable personality well. She even described him as a sly guy, like a snake, who always got what he wanted. That was Ji Ye-Jun. Her head started hurting badly, and she said he hadn't come to her before, and that she would somehow repay the debt. He asked her how she planned to do that. Soo-bin pursed her lips and stared at him. He reminded her that he had given her 10 years without interest and still asked how she would pay him back. He told her the contract would expire next month, and no matter what situation she was in, he wanted everything returned on time. The girl picked up her bag to leave, but he told her to think carefully about it. He added that after 1 year, he would pay her well so she could live with her parents comfortably. Soo-bin looked at him in disbelief, laughed, and told him he couldn't bribe her with such nonsense, sending him away. She thought he was such a fool as she stormed out of the restaurant, leaving him alone with his coffee. At the exit, she smiled and asked Ye-Jun if he even understood what he was saying, noticing his umbrella by the door. She grabbed his umbrella, ran outside, hoping he would get wet and sick, and finally returned home late at night. Her mother was happy to see her back and asked what happened on the date and if she had been with him the whole time. The daughter didn't want to tell much and said she was a bit tired and would go to sleep first. She quickly ran to her room, telling her mother she needed some sleep as well. Once in her room, the girl quickly lay on her bed, hugging her pillow, saying she was very tired, but she couldn't fall asleep for a long time, remembering the man's words about giving her the money 10 years ago and her promise to repay it. She thought about how the money she borrowed from Ji Ye-Jun, 100 million won, had helped them in many ways. Soo-bin had opened a small snack shop for her mother and used some money for her father's treatment. She could have repaid the debt with a loan if needed, but the problem was that Ye-Jun wanted the debt repaid not with money, but through marriage. She realized she had made a big mistake, turned to the other side, and tried to sleep since she had work the next day. That's how she first met Ye-Jun. They had been in elementary school together for 6 years, and at their first meeting, someone had pressed the wrong button. The girl had done it with good intentions because she was a kind and sweet girl, full of hope. He told her she wasn't very confident, which was why their relationship never worked out from the beginning. It all started when a new boy transferred to their school. He was incredibly popular with all the girls and seemed almost otherworldly, just stunningly handsome. The boy really was striking, with a handsome face, dark hair, and a neat hairstyle. His eyes showed warmth and friendliness. He was calmly sitting in class, reading a book, when a very strange girl approached him. She put a small box on his desk and asked if he wanted to drink it. She suggested he probably hadn't eaten yet and asked if he was hungry. The boy looked at her strangely and asked what kind of weirdo had come over. The girl became very angry at him for insulting her. He called her a brat and told her to drink it herself. The girl shot back that he wasn't exactly a handsome guy either and could skip drinking it if he didn't want to. The girl explained that Ji Ye-Jun had transferred to their school in 6th grade, and he was very popular because of his looks. She was immediately drawn to this handsome boy and decided to take care of him by offering lunch. When the teacher entered the classroom, they reminded the students that tomorrow was the last day to pay for school lunches. All the students agreed. Walking home from school, the girl thought Ji Ye-Jun might not have paid for lunch either. She reasoned that it was because he was so attractive, her gaze couldn't help following him no matter what he did. As she walked down the street, she overheard a strange conversation about lunch money. Someone was saying it was a good way to help people who might freeze outside one day. She got a few steps closer and heard someone complaining about how he dared to ask them for money. When she entered the building and walked down the hallway, she heard someone yelling again about how bold he was. A few steps further, she was shocked by what she saw. Soo-bin saw the boy lying on the floor, calling for help, while a stranger tried to punch him. The next day was a beautiful morning. The girl woke up, ready to go to school. When she arrived, she heard the bell ring. As she opened the classroom door, she thought maybe he hadn't paid for lunch because he couldn't, not because he didn't want to. She held an envelope with money, ready to give it to him, even if it meant sacrificing her own lunch money. She tried to place the envelope on his desk and wondered how she would explain it to her mother, knowing Ye-Jun would probably tell her to mind her own business. She attempted to slip the money into the book on the shelf under his desk, but got startled by a noise behind the door. She quickly put the envelope away and ran off. When everyone entered the classroom and class started, a boy came in, visibly upset, and told the teacher that his lunch money had disappeared. The students began whispering. They wondered if Ye-Jun hadn't paid last time. Some didn't know he was very poor. His mother had abandoned him, and he lived with his grandfather. Someone noticed blood on him and saw him heading into a semi-basement. His grandfather was always drunk and often argued. When the teacher searched for the money, it was found in Ye-Jun's desk drawer. The teacher asked if he really did this and told him to come to the teacher's office. Later, the girl told the teacher that the money found in his drawer was hers and that it was all a misunderstanding. The teacher suspected she was just protecting the boy because she felt sorry for him. In the end, the missing lunch money was found in one of the books, and all misunderstandings were cleared up. Walking down the hallway, the girl caught up with Ye-Jun, grabbed his hoodie, and started apologizing. She explained that she had acted with good intentions. He was furious. He mocked her good intentions and pushed her away, hitting her hand. He yelled, saying she thought her apology could fix everything, and accused her of being overly confident. The girl felt guilty and anxious, then asked what she could do to make things better for him. He shouted that he didn't need anything and told her not to worry. Then he added that someday he would get revenge, and walked away. He explained that he wanted her to feel the same sense of helplessness he had felt, insisting that he also had good intentions in doing so. He told her that this way, she would understand what it felt like to be rejected by everyone and see if she could survive it. As time went on, they drifted apart, eventually finishing elementary school, and their paths were not meant to cross again. As hard as it was to believe, the girl reflected that their lives had completely changed. Nothing was the same as before. Unexpectedly, her father's business went bankrupt, and they had to move to a new apartment. While climbing the stairs, she noticed their new apartment and realized Ye-Jun had lived in the top-floor unit of the same building. Helping her parents carry her things, she remembered hearing that Ye-Jun's mother had remarried a wealthy man and moved away. Soo-bin decided that even if they met at school, they would pretend not to know each other. Yet the atmosphere around him hadn't changed, and it scared her. One day at school, she saw two boys fighting fiercely in the hallway. She was terrified and started screaming. She noticed Ye-Jun lying on the floor, furious at the other boy, with a split lip. Despite the pain, he kept fighting. The fight went on for a long time. The boys ignored the scared girl, who kept screaming until she finally called the teacher, explaining there was a fight. The teacher took the boys to the office. When Ye-Jun came out, he saw the girl waiting outside, anxious and surprised. She asked him if he had done it on purpose, but he remained silent, irritated that she kept following him. He reminded her that they were supposed to pretend not to know each other and told her not to speak to him again, telling her to go away. She tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Soo-bin mentioned that the other boy had said he would take the school president position, which had angered Ye-Jun, and that she had seen them before the fight. She remembered watching the boys talk for a long time. Then Ye-Jun whispered something in the other boy's ear, and the fight started. Soo-bin asked if he had predicted that he would make that boy hit him first. He smiled at her and said, "Well, what's so unusual about that?" She asked what he meant. The boy replied that there was no problem at all. Losing can also be winning. Forgiveness is kindness. And she had expected something along those lines from him, so it wasn't funny at all. The girl stood silently, listening to him. He added that it sounded like something they tell children, but he intended to stay the same until he died. The boy was about to leave, but she grabbed his hand tightly, shouting for him to wait and listen carefully. She told him that revenge only leads to more revenge, asking if he understood. He asked why she wouldn't leave him alone. She insisted that he shouldn't do that. Surprised, he asked why. Then, touching her shoulder, he asked if she wanted to help others while being afraid herself. He leaned closer and whispered that she was afraid because she thought she would become their next target. The girl was stunned and didn't know how to respond. She turned and walked away, thinking that if he had done anything more than he already had, he would have surely been expelled or suspended. The boy went in the opposite direction, but she couldn't stop thinking about his position in the student council and the privileges that came with it. With the obstacle gone, people would now try to take advantage of the situation and confront each other equally, she thought. He was a candidate for student council president, she reflected. But Ye-Jun had always been ignored, which probably caused him pain. Yet, he had changed so much, and now had everything he needed. Soo-bin had been in middle school for 3 years. Coming home, she asked her father what she should do. She cried, feeling confused, but her father reassured her that everything would be fine. It had been a street stall, where her parents had earned a living until local delinquents destroyed it one day. Her father fell ill and needed 6 months of treatment, but they had no money at the time, which upset and scared her greatly. Those memories made her feel humiliated. Yet, ironically, Ji Ye-Jun was the only one who had extended a helping hand. One day, someone knocked on the door, and when she opened it, she saw the guy greeting her. He asked if this was Soo-bin's house. The girl looked at him, frightened, unable to understand who he was or why he had come. The tall, slender, handsome guy with a smile introduced himself as her friend. His name was Ji Ye-Jun. Her mother clasped his hands, saying she didn't know how to repay him for his kindness. The guy smiled and said he was glad to help. He explained that when he had problems, Soo-bin had helped him by paying for his school lunch. The amount borrowed was 100 million won, with a repayment period of 10 years. Ji Ye-Jun lent them the money, and the girl would start paying it back once she was financially stable. It sounded like a very advantageous deal, and the guy said to consider it as repayment of the debt, looking at the girl and laughing. The girl, desperate for money at the time, naively accepted the offer. She didn't understand why the guy had decided to help them. Her mother was very worried and asked if he had really given such a large sum. Ye-Jun replied that the amount didn't matter. "I do this from the heart," he said, silently looking at the girl, whose expression reflected both joy and surprise. A woman stood beside him. She introduced herself as his grandmother's secretary, who would help with the contract. The guy explained that all documents had been prepared in advance, handed them to the girl, and told her to review them. The girl's face turned pale and displeased as she was surprised that he had prepared the contract beforehand. Noticing her gloom, the guy asked what was wrong with her face, but she was too worried to answer. He gently touched her face and told her not to worry because he wasn't just giving her money. As he was about to leave, he turned back and said he would find her even if she were on the other side of the world. Placing his hand on her shoulder, he asked if she understood he was serious. The girl wondered if Ye-Jun had felt as miserable when he was accused of stealing lunch money, but she realized his revenge was on a completely different scale. The next day, she went to work at the office as a deputy director and performed her duties very professionally. Colleagues asked if a month had passed since her promotion and if she would treat them today. She thought it would be awkward to forget about it and agreed, realizing it was proper etiquette. "Yes, I will treat you all," she said, and her colleagues cheered that the deputy director was the best. After work, they went to a restaurant, enjoying a wonderful evening and ordering expensive dishes. After dinner, everyone left satisfied, thanking her for the meal. Soo-bin was pleased that everyone had enjoyed it. However, when she checked her phone, she saw her credit card balance was almost empty this month, and she felt disappointed. Standing at the bus stop, she thought that she was the only one in her family earning money, so she couldn't treat it as her personal wealth. On the bus, she reflected that even working like an ant, money still slipped through her fingers. Making money was not fun at all. She muttered to herself that she was fed up, realizing she needed to repay the credits step by step instead of burdening Ji Ye-Jun. Thinking about how Ji Ye-Jun had helped her repay illegal partial loans, she knew she couldn't refuse him, even if he asked for money now. She recalled his words, just 1 year, and then he would even pay extra for her. She thought carefully about it. On the bus home, her mind was full of worries. She didn't even want to think about marriage. She had almost gathered 100 million won, but still had to pay her father's medical bills. Yet she couldn't forget the man's words about paying enough for her to live comfortably and even open a store for her mother. Staying by her parents' side for life had always been her wish. She closed her eyes and thought everything through again. She had to spend 1 year with him, and after that, she would be free forever. Soo-bin tried to shake off her thoughts, shouting for them to leave her alone, attempting not to think about him anymore. Then she received a message on her phone. She saw that Sun Young's wedding was scheduled for that week and wondered how much money she should give as a gift. Taking a deep breath, she put her phone in her bag and thought she might pretend to be crazy, but then she forced herself to pull herself together. It was a beautiful sunny day, and it was time for Sun Young's wedding. The girl happily went to the venue to congratulate her. She approached the bride, complimented her on looking beautiful, and suggested taking a photo as a keepsake. Then the girl stepped aside to chat a little with her friends. One asked if the bride had mentioned that her husband worked at a large company, but another said she didn't know and honestly couldn't believe it. Who would have guessed she'd announce her wedding just a month after breaking up with her boyfriend? She had been dating her ex for a long time, and everyone expected she'd marry him. Yet this marriage didn't seem... Fa Sun Young had acted wisely. "So, Soo-bin?" her friends asked. But she didn't know what to say and just smiled. The conversation was very interesting to her. The girls continued walking. "If this marriage is for love," one said, "they won't separate, which means she chose the right path." Another added that she was so jealous of the bride because her husband probably gave her lots of gifts. One girl then said she also wanted to get married, even if it only lasted a year before they separated, and there was nothing wrong with that. Everyone should try it at least once so they don't regret it later, right? A friend asked. Soo-bin thought that she had also believed a wedding should be based on love, not just a formality. Sitting there, she thought her friends really did see marriage from different perspectives. "Look at Sun Young's mom," the girl said. "She must be so happy to have such a son-in-law. I also dreamed of being a good wife and mother, more than anyone else," the girl said. "But now it seems like a story that will never happen in my life." Of course, it meant nothing to her, she thought. "Oh dear, you're dreaming of this. It means you've thought it all through." It felt as if someone whispered these words in her ear. The girl remembered the man and waved her hands as if to push her thoughts away. Why does he occupy my mind every time I try to think of something else? She wondered. Then the girls looked around and saw a man sitting nearby. He's so handsome, one said, and the other agreed, asking if he might be a celebrity. Soo-bin blinked, her thoughts drifting far away. The girls wanted to sit next to the handsome man during the banquet, but then wondered if he might be married. The girl was so lost in thoughts about Ji Ye-Jun that she didn't notice the man sitting nearby. "Oh, he's looking this way!" the girls shouted, as the man indeed kept glancing at them. "He's such a cutie," they exclaimed, smiling. Soo-bin, noticing Ji Ye-Jun, shouted so loudly it seemed even the birds flew from the trees. What the heck? Why is he here again? She looked at him, startled, wondering why he was so handsome. Ji Ye-Jun was a guest on the groom's side. Why do I have to see his face again? She thought. Gathering her friends, she suggested they leave. After the wedding ceremony, the girls went together to the banquet table to choose comfortable seats. Then the girl, carrying a plate, went to pick her food, but suddenly heard a voice behind her saying she had the same taste. The man had approached so unexpectedly that she was startled. Turning around, she saw Ji Ye-Jun and asked why he had appeared and what he was planning. The man calmly chose his food and explained that the groom was the son of their company manager. The girl looked at him, surprised, but he calmly picked fish for his plate and said of course he had been invited to the wedding. Does this make any sense? Do you think I'm a fool? If you wanted to apologize, you could have done it better, the girl said. He replied that he didn't seem like a joker and had never tricked her. Soo-bin glared at him angrily, not expecting to see him at the wedding, thinking he was following her. The man was surprised by her reaction, but then she told him to just be honest and asked if he had been following her. "Why would I follow you? Maybe it's you," he said. The girl, furious, snapped, "As if! Are you out of your mind?" He thought she was angry because it was very noisy in the hall, which irritated her. The girl carelessly put more food on her plate and, still upset, ran back to her table. The man stood smiling, watching her leave, unable to understand why she had reacted that way. Guests sat at the long table, laughing, chatting, and praising the delicious food. Everyone was having a great time. Carrying her plate to the table, the girl noticed seats meant for elderly people and was very surprised. She asked if the elderly people sitting across had already eaten. A girl replied that yes, they had, and asked if she hadn't noticed them leaving. Then some people at the table called the CEO and suggested he sit next to the girl. The man approached the table. Seeing Ji Ye-Jun sit down, Soo-bin shouted, "He's here again!" She was shocked that he even sat next to her. Her friends were surprised by her reaction. The man explained he had just taken the empty seat he saw. A friend sitting near Soo-bin asked if she knew him. She pretended not to understand, then looked at the man and asked, "Are you talking about him?" They sat next to each other, pretending not to know one another. Someone at the table asked the CEO if he knew the girl sitting next to him, and he just nodded. "Yes," the man said. "We studied together in elementary, middle, and high school." Their friends were amazed. "Oh, that's wonderful! Nice to meet you, and great to see Soo-bin's classmate here," the girl said. "She never mentioned having such an attractive classmate," a friend said, nudging Soo-bin and joking about arranging a blind date, laughing. While the man continued talking with the men at the table, the friend asked what he did for work since he was called the CEO. "We work at a travel agency called K-Tour," he replied. "It's the best travel agency in the city." The man handed the girls a business card. Looking at it, they were surprised, asking if it was K-Tour from K-Group. The girls imagined themselves on a trip, already picturing themselves on a plane. "It was the best travel agency. And the person in front of you is our CEO," guest said. The girl sat, stunned, speechless. While everyone chatted cheerfully, a man quietly approached the table. He addressed the girls, who initially didn't notice him. Placing his hands on their shoulders, he exclaimed, "Who do I see? And what beautiful ladies are at this wonderful table. Looking around, he spotted Soo-bin and remarked that she was here too, becoming more beautiful with each passing day. He approached the girls, looked at them, and suggested they sit together so they wouldn't appear like zombies. The girls agreed. He asked them what was wrong with their faces. Soo-bin wondered why this man was here. The girls thought they didn't even know him. But the man continued, saying it had been so long since their last meeting, and asked how she had been. Taking a glass in her hand, the girl thought of Jin-sung. His name was Choi Jin-sung, and in college everyone called him an explosive bomb because he became unbearable when he drank. She wondered if she should be happy to see him. The man remarked that it had been a while since he had seen her. Smiling at her, he noted that their Soo-bin still walked around with a sour expression, just like she had in college. The girl pretended not to care and asked when she had supposedly become his Soo-bin. Ji Ye-Jun smiled and told the man that she had remained just as fiery as ever. Jin-sung sat closer to the girl, smiled, adjusted his hair, and mentioned that he had become quite popular lately. "Haven't you heard the rumors that I work at a trading company and they pay me more than expected?" said the red-haired boy. Rumors spread so fast these days. The girl tried to focus on eating, ignoring him, thinking that it wasn't unusual. Time passed, and he still liked to show off. She thought she'd had enough of his games, remembering their college days. He hadn't changed at all. Noticing she was ignoring him, the Eeft laughed and asked why she was doing so. She thought that, in truth, she couldn't stand him, especially being a third-generation chip. He addressed her again, saying he was talking to her. She replied that she heard him and tried to recall what he had said about his business dealings. Then she looked at him and accused him of selling fake goods, claiming that his watch was one of them. The man turned red, his face showing anger, and his body trembled. The conversation with her was unpleasant for him. A few minutes later, he lifted his head, looked at her seriously, smiled, and admitted that she had asked correctly about the watch. Choi Jin-sung, trembling, held a glass and asked what had happened with the guy from medical college, recalling that she had said they were planning to get married. Ji Ye-Jun listened carefully to what the man said. Jin-sung mentioned that rumors had spread that the guy had left her because he had an affair with the granddaughter of a CEO from a large company. Soo-bin was furious that he had said such things about her in front of everyone, gritting her teeth to stop herself from hitting him. She slammed her fist on the table, feeling embarrassed. But Jin-sang smiled and asked if what he said was true or not. The man reminded her that she had said she was going to marry the medical college guy, and he wasn't the only one who remembered. Jin-sang laughed loudly, slapping the table, calling her overconfident Shin Soo-bin. Ji Ye-Jun sat quietly, listening carefully. The man continued, saying she had raised her nose too high, which didn't suit her surroundings, asking if it made her like Pinocchio. "Back in college," he said, "you were infamous for not leaving your room." The girl listened nervously, holding the fork on the table. "Isn't that a terrible judgment for a girl?" he said. The friends whispered among themselves, saying Soo-bin's ex was a taboo subject, but they couldn't stop the conversation. Then Jin-sang added that, honestly, it was fair punishment, questioning how she planned to marry now and who would want her as a wife. "You used to flirt boldly with other boys. You have no shame left," he said, making sure she understood. These words infuriated the girl. She grabbed the fork tightly and shouted at him to shut his mouth. But Ji Ye-Jun, sitting next to her, held her hand, asking her to calm down and ignore such hurtful words. The man tried to soothe her, holding her hand firmly, looking at her carefully, and said she was wasting her energy. He continued holding her hand, telling her not to respond to every dog that barked at her. The girl calmed down slightly. Jin-sang was furious that he called him a dog and yelled at Ji Ye-Jun, asking if he understood who he was talking to. Ji Ye-Jun stood, looked coldly at the man, and asked if he should know who he was dealing with. The man still held the girl's hand, gently looking into her eyes, telling her to ignore him. Ginseng, laughing, continued insulting her, asking if she had washed away her past and if this man next to her was her boyfriend. "You're petty!" the girl shouted, offended. But the man continued to provoke her with unpleasant words. He told Ji Ye-Jun she had deceived him, but Ji Ye-Jun calmly replied they didn't need to hear it. He continued holding her hand gently, looking at her with tenderness. She felt protected and surprised by his behavior. The man smiled warmly and calmly, asking if she had been upset hearing such insulting words. Soo-bin trembled all over. He then asked if she wanted to move to another seat or go eat something tasty. "Maybe you want something else?" Ginseng asked. The girl grew angrier, saying she couldn't take it anymore. He stood, moving toward her, asking what she thought she was doing here, then reached to grab her hand. Ji Ye-Jun gently pulled her close, holding her by the shoulder, while holding a glass of water in the other hand, trying to protect her from the enraged man. When Ginseng wouldn't calm down and continued insulting her, the man splashed water in his face, trying to stop him and saying there was a limit to everything. The man was furious, water dripping down his face. Security arrived and told him he couldn't behave like that here. Ji Ye-Jun placed the empty glass on the table and, without letting go of the girl, told him to stop immediately. Ginseng became even angrier, shouting about the water, but the security continued trying to escort him out. "Don't you get it?" he yelled at the security, struggling and resisting. The guests at the table began asking if the CEO was okay. Her friends rushed to the girl, shocked by what had happened, asking if she was all right. She thought he had completely lost his mind. What on earth had he been trying to do? Ji Ye-Jun asked her if she was okay, wrapping an arm around her shoulder, and she replied that she was fine. Her friend saw the man and the girl chatting so sweetly, then asked if they had been flirting, and smiled warmly. The man just smiled, but she shouted that there was no flirting, that it was nonsense. They weren't in that kind of relationship. In fact, they could barely stand each other. One of her friends turned to her and said it seemed like the CEO didn't agree with Soo-bin. She was very surprised. The man gave her a strange look and smiled slightly. What a silly expression. Why did he make that face? She wondered. She looked at him very seriously and said that perhaps he should adjust his expression because she didn't like how he was looking at her. All the guests sitting nearby were watching them closely. Then the man admitted that, honestly, he had been chasing Soo-bin one-sidedly. Her friends ran over to her, gently nudging her, saying they had known it would happen. What a surprise! Why had she kept it from them? And now they understood why Chejin-sang had been so jealous. She replied that it wasn't true, not to listen to him, that he was lying, and they had misunderstood everything. "You amaze me," the man said. He reminded her that he had come to see her the other day, then smiled at her and asked, "Let's get married." She was furious and confused, not understanding why he was saying this now. "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you proposing this now?" she shouted. She was surprised, but he gently took her finger and promised that he would take good care of her. Looking at her with loving eyes, he told her to stop wandering and settle down with him. She looked at him, thinking there was no way she could refuse. God, could this really be true? She thought. He took her hand and suggested they leave. Once they were outside and the door closed behind them, she yelled that he had completely lost his mind and demanded to know why he had said such nonsense in front of her friends. He pressed a finger to her forehead and asked how she could make a scene after he had helped her. She replied that nobody had asked him to help. Determined, he said he didn't think she had the right to speak that way, but she objected. Then he remembered those school days, the quiet talks between kids, their eyes scanning him from head to toe. Those cold stares were expected. She felt a slight shiver run through her body. But he reminded her that she had helped him back then, even though he had asked her to. "That's what I thought," she replied. He stood there, quietly, watching her, The memories of those school days and everything he had endured back then pained him deeply. Soo-bin tried to understand why he had done it and started yelling at him to speak plainly, not to try and deceive her. They stood there for a long time in silence, staring at each other, until she asked if he hadn't wanted to help her. At least, that's what she thought. He didn't respond. She continued, asking if he wanted them to believe they were going to get married. Ji Ye-Jun made a strange expression, and she demanded to know if that had been his plan and why he had put on such a show. He paused thoughtfully, then said it seemed she had become smarter. He wanted to see how she would react to his words. "What? Are you crazy?" she shouted. She was furious again, but he said it was better this way. She was so angry that she waved her hand in front of his face, demanding to know why he had said they had met before. Flailing her arms, she slipped and nearly fell. She barely caught herself and screamed in fright. He noticed she was losing her balance, quickly stepped forward, reached out, and caught her. As always, he tried to help her. She looked at him, terrified, unable to understand what had happened or why she had almost fallen. Her eyes showed fear, anger, and surprise all at once. As they continued walking, he asked how she hadn't broken her head by now. She shot back, "Are you serious?" He tried to walk ahead and leave her alone, but she stopped him. He paused and suggested they grab a bite to eat. The girl was annoyed, remembering his earlier words about her being wiser now and that it was better this way. She muttered to herself, "Maybe look at yourself first." She then recalled weddings and her friends, thinking it was true that she didn't see them often, but she couldn't avoid them forever. "All right, it's fine," she thought. The water was already spilled, so agreeing to go eat with him seemed acceptable. She stood lost in thought, when suddenly he approached her, looked straight into her eyes, and asked if she wasn't coming. "Let's go eat," he said. She just smiled. "You want me to eat with you?" she asked. "And then you'll leave me alone, right? If we eat, you eat." She wanted him to leave her in peace as soon as possible. The man thought for a moment and then said, "Soo-bin, you know, you're quite a contradictory person." He liked that about her character. She stared at him, thinking that in some ways he was completely right. She really was a contradictory person. "Food is just food," he said. "Like chocolate milk. It's just chocolate milk." At first, she didn't understand what he meant. As they walked on, he remarked that he hadn't expected her to be so sensitive about having lunch with him. "If it bothers you that much," he said, "let's just grab something to drink. I'll buy you whatever you want." She hesitated and then remembered. Soo-bin remembered the chocolate milk and how, back in school, she had first approached him, asking if he hadn't eaten yet and if he was hungry. What's wrong with chocolate milk? She thought. She was grateful for what he had done and accepted his gesture, though she wondered how it might have affected his feelings. That was something she had once told Ji Ye-Jun when they were kids. The girls stood there, trying to understand why everything happening now reminded her of those old school days. He stopped, looked at her, and said he was a bit busy, so they should hurry. She paused again, thinking he had said the exact same words when they were children. A wave of fear swept over her. "All right, let's go," she said, slowly following him. She thought to herself, when he frowns, he looks so attractive. I hate admitting it, but honestly, he does look good. Nothing about him leaves me speechless, she thought. In reality, she felt a storm of emotions. She felt she should thank him for standing up to Trejin-sang. It had even been kind of fun and enjoyable. She wondered why Ji Ye-Jun had never thanked her for that favor. Things she hadn't understood before suddenly made sense as she had grown older. Carrying her bag on her shoulder, she hurried to catch up with him. He had told her he was pressed for time and in a big rush. While catching up, she mentioned she'd planned to order something expensive and would drink costly alcohol. But he agreed. After a while, they arrived at a very luxurious car parked near the wedding ceremony venue. Wow, what a beautiful sedan, she thought as she got in. But he asked what she wanted to eat. She hesitated, unsure what to order. The girl pretended not to hear him at first, but eventually said it was up to him since he was paying. Knowing she liked meat, he suggested finding a place that served it. She liked not having to choose herself, so she lifted her chin proudly and agreed. He pressed the gas harder, and the car sped off. Wait for me, steak, she thought, planning to ask him to order beef. They sped through the city at night when his phone rang. Pulling it from his pocket, he saw it was his grandfather calling. "Hello?" he answered. His grandfather asked where he was, and the man replied that he was in the city and driving. "What happened?" he asked. His grandfather explained that his grandmother felt very ill and had lost consciousness. The news filled him with worry. Upon hearing this, something clicked in his mind, and he sharply turned the car in another direction at high speed. She didn't understand and shouted, asking why he turned the car, but he gripped the wheel tighter and drove on without explaining. Turning to look at him, she asked what was wrong with his expression, what had happened, and where they were going. He explained that his grandfather had called and said his grandmother had lost consciousness. Soo-bin was shocked by the news. Finally, she understood why he was rushing. He was deeply worried, driving fast and barely speaking. She knew Ji Ye-Jun wouldn't have helped her purely from the heart. She was certain his grandmother was behind his actions. Whenever he offered help, he never came alone. He had her grandmother's secretary with him. She had always wanted a chance to thank her grandmother, and she told him he needed to hurry. She urged that they leave quickly, worried they might be too late. Arriving at the hospital, the man quickly found the room where his grandmother lay and quietly sat on a chair beside her bed. She looked completely exhausted, slowly opened her eyes, and glanced around. He sat silently, watching her. Then he suddenly rose, looked at his grandmother, and asked if she had come too. Weakly, she replied yes. He was overjoyed, and she teased that she had made him worry. He took her hand firmly. "You can't leave me," he said, feeling as if his heart might burst. Looking at him with eyes full of love, she gently held his hand and said she could never leave him. She kept holding his hand, and he didn't let go for a moment. "I'll win this battle," she said. "Illness like this is nothing." The door to the room was open, and Soo-bin stood in the hallway, nervously clutching her bag. Standing there, she wondered what to do. The atmosphere was so intense that she wished she had stayed in the car. She tried to calm herself, telling herself not to cry, but also worried about ruining the mood by going in to thank him for the borrowed money. She hesitated for a long time, standing by the door, before deciding to quietly peek inside. As she gently opened the door, she didn't notice her grandfather standing there. He was surprised and studied her closely. "Who are you?" he asked, adjusting his glasses to get a better look. He couldn't understand why this lady had entered, and if she had come to visit his wife. The girl greeted him politely, tilting her head slightly, and explained that she was a friend of Ji Ye-Jun. Embarrassment immediately washed over her. He studied her silently for a long moment, trying to understand. She worried she had made a mistake by claiming to be his friend. "You're Ji Ye-Jun's friend?" he asked, taking her hand. "Oh my, you came with him to visit grandmother." He held her hand for a long time without letting go. He asked if she had been with Ji Ye-Jun when he answered the call and rushed here. She nodded in agreement. "Grandmother, look who's here," he said, still holding her hand. She felt extremely awkward. "This lovely lady, Ji Ye-Jun's friend," he added. Soo-bin stood there, stunned, unable to speak. Ji Ye-Jun approached his grandfather and asked him to wait, which surprised him. Soo-bin thought this was the first time anyone had called her charming. "Ye-Jun's friend?" the grandmother asked, astonished. Soo-bin tried to respond but didn't even know what to say. The woman raised her head slightly to get a better look and asked why Soo-bin was there, wanting to get to know her better. As she tried to support herself on the bed, her hand slipped and she began to fall. "God help me!" the grandmother cried out in fright. Ye-Jun panicked, fearing she would fall. He looked at Soo-bin sitting nearby and shouted for her to hold her. The girl quickly stretched out her arms, catching the grandmother. Being nearby, she saved her from falling. "Are you okay?" she asked, holding her by the shoulder. The grandmother said she was fine and was deeply grateful to Soo-bin for saving her. Soo-bin smiled, pleased that the atmosphere in the room had shifted naturally. Even the grandmother brightened and smiled. "What a lovely girl Ye-Jun has. What's your name?" asked the grandmother. "Shin Soo-bin," she replied. The grandmother said even her name was beautiful. They began chatting warmly. The grandmother asked how long she had known Ye-Jun, and the girl said since elementary school. "Oh my, so long?" the grandmother said, gently stroking her hands. "Such a beautiful girl is dating my grandson." Soo-bin felt a strange sensation. No one had ever looked at her so tenderly before. Memories of her ex-boyfriend's family, who had never accepted her or their upcoming marriage, resurfaced, causing pain. That had been her reason for not wanting to marry again. Perhaps remembering their mistreatment hurt her heart. Then the grandmother said she was very happy to meet her, and Soo-bin wished her a speedy recovery. After saying goodbye to her grandmother, the girl stepped out of the hospital room and walked down the hallway. The man followed behind her. They moved in silence, not exchanging a single word. He looked at Soo-bin, wondering if he had misjudged her. Soon after, they both stepped outside. They got into the car together and started driving, still without saying a word. Each was lost in their own thoughts. The silence between them only made the atmosphere heavier. Words were hard to find, so they just kept driving quietly. The girl felt uneasy about everything that had just happened and tried to start a conversation, but the man suddenly suggested eating gopchang, even adding that he knew a good spot nearby. They entered a nice little restaurant, sat down, and the man ordered gopchang, along with a bottle of soju. He poured himself a drink. The girl watched him silently. Thirsty, Ji Ye-Jun drank the glass in one go and set it back on the table. He looked at her seriously. If she had no negative thoughts about marriage, he asked, why wouldn't she just accept his proposal? The girl was overwhelmed, unsure of what to say. For now, all she managed was that she felt sorry for his grandmother. The man reminded her that the money he had lent her wasn't even his. She had suspected as much and simply nodded. He paused, then explained where the money really came from and why he had turned to his grandmother for help. When he came to her, his grandmother had asked what was wrong, but he couldn't bring himself to explain. She reassured him that he could always tell her everything honestly. He couldn't reveal the full truth, so instead, he told her that a friend who had once helped him was now in serious trouble. His grandmother listened carefully, while he admitted that he wanted to help that friend, even though he wasn't sure his intentions were completely selfless. Loving him dearly, his grandmother agreed to help, but told him not to say a word to his parents. "This has to stay just between us," she had said. The man confessed that the money had been secretly set aside by his grandmother, hidden from his parents. The girl was shocked to hear that. To make it clear, he repeated that he had taken the money from his grandmother and admitted he still felt guilty about it. Normally, he hated playing on people's sympathy, but in this case, there was no other way. He knew Shin Soo-bin was exactly the kind of person who would react to it. They sat in the cafe, talking. The girl thought back to when her world had seemed to collapse under her feet, pulling her deeper into despair. During that darkest time, when she desperately needed medicine for her sick father, the boy and his grandmother had been the ones to reach out a helping hand. For that, she felt deeply grateful to his grandmother. No matter what, she owed her. Still, no matter how cold she might have seemed, She had never wanted to deceive anyone with the idea of a marriage of convenience. Was marriage really the only option? The girl finally said aloud that marriage wasn't as simple as he imagined. But Ye-Jun countered that his father never went back on his word. He was prepared to give up everything, even public appearances and possessions. Whether he showed it or not, Ji Ye-Jun was already standing on the edge of a cliff. If it came down to it, he added, there would be no choice but to repay the debt he had once lent her. Then he spoke of his childhood. From the moment he was born, he had been unwanted. His maternal grandfather hated his daughter for leaving and drowned his anger in alcohol, beating him daily. Later, his mother took him away, and he was accepted into a new family. He recounted it all with pain in his voice. Yet even in the new family, no one recognized him except his grandmother, who had always loved and cared for him. Whenever guests came over, he overheard his mother introducing his younger brother as her eldest son. Those words cut deeply. He would stand outside the living room door, fists clenched, unable to enter, growing up believing he'd never be able to connect with others. He remembered his grandmother's words in the hospital as she held his hands. Ye-Jun, promise me you'll find true love and live a happy life. She had said she hoped he'd meet a good wife, someone who would cherish him until the very end, and that they'd spend the rest of their lives in love. The girl asked if his grandmother's last wish was to see him married. The man replied that he simply couldn't let her leave this world without seeing that wish fulfilled. The girl lifted her glass, pausing thoughtfully. She admitted that his grandmother truly meant a lot to him. The man, surprised, asked what she meant. She brushed it off, poured herself a drink, and downed it. Setting the empty glass back on the table, she asked why he insisted it wasn't true, when she didn't understand the reason. Soo-bin confessed that it felt as though he was trying to take his father's fortune and everything else. Then she asked if it was all because of her. She added that it was no wonder he felt different from the rest of his family, except for his grandmother. Yet inwardly, she thought he might actually be worse than the others. Running her fingers along the glass, she laughed lightly and told him it was time to come clean. Soo-bin grabbed the bottle, poured herself another drink, and asked what exactly he was planning. The man only told her she was right about everything. He explained that he was only the family's son in name, but in truth, he had nothing to do with them. His father had never given him a chance to achieve anything on his own, he said bitterly, because he was still being controlled even now. Ji Ye-Jun poured her another drink and went on. As promised, he would give her the property after everything was done, and she'd be free to live however she wanted, starting fresh. But the girl frowned. Were they trying to form some kind of crime gang? The alcohol was getting to her. She then asked if he was planning to rob his own house. Laughing, he told her it wasn't such a bad comparison. Not long after, she grew completely drunk, repeating his name over and over before laying her head on the table. He told her to just say what she wanted, but she couldn't respond. She was feeling far too sick. Thinking about his childhood, the girl felt deep pity for him. She asked if it had been unbearably hard for him. With a sigh, she admitted that she wanted to comfort him, but she was afraid he wouldn't like it. She said she couldn't bring herself to say such things, but he probably thought she looked down on him. The girl's words hit him hard. Angrily, he shouted back, asking if she really thought he needed her pity. Nothing made him angrier than being treated with sympathy. Ji Ye-Jun was furious. He told her not to show him any pity, but instead to just accept his proposal, insisting it would help them both. The girl lifted her head and looked at him carefully. She admitted she knew he hadn't always been such a bad person. He calmed down a little and said he was glad she realized that everyone makes mistakes. Soo-bin then asked if he really hated her so much, but in his eyes, she saw the complete opposite. He answered uncertainly. She pointed out that he didn't even know if he hated her, calling him despicable. Angrily, he told her not to call him that. He explained that he simply needed someone he could pay for this arrangement. That was why he had chosen her, he said. He warned that the moment she grew attached to him, she would become useless. The girl asked if he would just throw her away once that happened. He said if that was her question, then there was only one answer. When something becomes unnecessary, it gets discarded. He added that there was no reason to hold on to something useless. But before she could respond, the girl rested her head on the table. He pulled money from his pocket and placed it in front of her face. Seeing she wasn't in any condition to continue, he told her to call a taxi and promised they would talk again once she sobered up. Then he left, saying he would make sure she reconsidered her perspective. He walked away without looking back, reminding her that neither of them was standing alone on the edge. They were both there, together. Half asleep, Soo-bin heard him leave. Slowly lifting her head, she glanced around. He truly was gone, without even thinking of coming back. She cursed him silently, furious that he dared abandon a woman like that, leaving only taxi fare behind. Staggering slightly, she rose from her seat and headed for the exit. Outside, the girl waited for her bus and climbed aboard. Holding onto the rail, she struggled to stay steady on her feet. She remembered how, before leaving the cafe, he had left money on the table for a taxi. She wondered absent-mindedly where she could have put it. While riding the bus, she slipped her hand into her pocket and found the money he had left. Anger flared in her, and she clenched it tightly in her fist. So this is reality, she thought, as she stepped off at her stop, watching the bus disappear into the night. The next morning at work, the first thing she did was sit at her desk, open her notebook, and start thinking about how she could repay her debt. His words echoed in her mind. He had said he needed someone he could simply pay for this, and that was why he chose her. Thoughts of Ji Ye-Jun hadn't left her since yesterday. She wondered when she could finally pay off her debt so he would leave her alone. And now, opening her notebook, she saw the same number. 10 million. For 8 years, she had worked different jobs and saved, but unexpected expenses had eaten into her savings. No matter how much she wanted to eat something nice, wear something new, or buy something for herself, she always had to refuse. Her life had been filled with sacrifice. Only now, after so many years, did it fully hit her. Her debt was massive. The realization terrified her. She remembered his words. He had already given her 10 years without interest, yet she still said she would pay him back, someday. He had asked how exactly she planned to do that. The girl fell into despair, but then told herself she would not give up. She could do this, because this was her reality. She picked up her pen and began writing down each step she needed to take. Even if her payments got delayed, she believed she could make it work. She thought that if she tried to repay the whole sum at once, she would end up living in even harsher, more miserable conditions. If she chose to pay him from her salary, she realized, she would need 2 or 3 more jobs. Resting her pen against her lips, she tried to gather her thoughts. With all of this weighing on her, even the idea of marriage seemed impossible. Debt wasn't something that could just be erased by someone else's help, and chasing money made life unbearably unhappy, she thought. Even though Soo-bin tried her hardest to earn as much as possible, the very thought of selling herself disgusted her. Then she wondered if maybe she had just become boring. Still, there were always other paths. Was she simply too proud? Remembering what he had told her, she thought, it's only 1 year. Could I just close my eyes to everything for 1 year? If she agreed to 1 year of marriage, it could make both of them happy. It might even solve all their problems. Then she wouldn't have to watch her parents suffer anymore. She loved them dearly. She sat lost in thought until a knock startled her. Her assistant entered, asking if they were ready for opening, and she answered yes. Soo-bin spent the entire day working at her cafe, polite and welcoming to every guest. Late at night, after finishing, she headed home. At the bus stop, she climbed onto her usual bus, exhausted, eager to finally get home. She couldn't wait to rest. Tomorrow was her day off, and at last she would be able to sleep in and treat herself to something tasty. But as she neared her home, someone called her name. She stopped, wondering if she had imagined it. Turning around, she was stunned to see the guy, the one who had once pushed her away. He said it had been a long time. He asked how she had been, but she only stared at him before walking on without answering. She had no desire to speak with him. She shouted for him not to come near her. He stopped, staring at her in surprise. She grew furious, yelling that he shouldn't even dare to approach her, warning that if he took one step closer, she wouldn't hold herself back. But he caught up, touched her forehead with his hand, and she just looked at him silently. All he said was an apology. After their breakup, she had often wondered how she would react if she saw him again. Now he admitted he knew she was shocked by his sudden appearance. When he tried to touch her again, the girl pushed him away, shouting that it was useless and he shouldn't dare. Soo-bin was stunned by his return and asked why he was there and what he wanted. He only stood in silence, staring at her. He had thought she would be glad to see him, but her reaction left him speechless. What a disgrace, she thought. She had promised herself she wouldn't waver if she met him again, yet here she stood, not even knowing what to say. The guy wondered aloud where to begin, but the girl stayed silent. He asked what he needed to do to make her feel better. She asked if he would actually do it if she told him, and when he said he would try, she demanded that he disappear from her sight. He told her she could even hit him if she wanted. She was completely free to act as she pleased. To her, his words sounded pitiful. Soo-bin snapped back, saying she wasn't like him, not someone who hit others. He asked if she was still angry at him over the past, guilt weighing heavy in his voice. She reminded him that many years had passed since their breakup, yet he hadn't changed. Even if he did, he would never deserve her forgiveness, so she told him to leave quietly. While they were talking, her phone rang. Seeing it was from an unknown number, she hesitated. Normally, she never answered calls from strangers, but thinking that if he weren't standing here, she would have ignored it, she picked up and greeted the caller. A familiar voice answered, saying it was him. She was shocked, then lifted her head proudly and pretended to be delighted by the call. She smiled at first, then said he shouldn't be calling again since she had already told him to rest that night. Ji Ye-Jun was the one calling, and he was completely thrown off by how she spoke to him, since he never expected such a response. The girl called him darling and teased him for missing her so much. Her voice sounded soft and tender, and the man standing beside her flinched at what he heard. After a pause, the caller asked if this really was Shin Soo-bin's number. The girl cursed internally, realizing she had just called Ji Ye-Jun darling by mistake. She kept the conversation going. Ji Ye-Jun, still puzzled, asked if she had eaten something strange, but she only asked where he was at the moment. After a long pause, he answered that he wasn't darling, but he was standing near her mother's store. She wondered why he was there. Then, claiming she was at a bus stop, she asked if he could come pick her up. She added that she was with a very troublesome person, though her ex-boyfriend didn't catch the meaning and asked what she was trying to hint at. The girl tried to leave and told him to hurry, but he misunderstood her words and declared that things would be settled here and now. Ji Ye-Jun said he would be there in 5 minutes. She turned to her ex and asked if he had heard that and whether she needed to explain any further. He just stood there in silence. She pointed out that they had reached some sort of conclusion and asked why he wouldn't go his own way. Still, he didn't leave. She grew more anxious, realizing she had no plan B. She looked completely lost. Finally, she shouted at him to go. If Ji Ye-Jun really showed up now, she wondered what would happen next. The man asked if she was getting married. She replied that of course she was, and asked if he really thought her life had ended the moment he left her. He denied it, clenching his fist, and admitted she was a good person. He looked crushed, regretting how things had turned out. Soo-bin turned her head away and said she wouldn't thank him for those words, then asked him to leave her alone. As she started to walk away, he caught up, grabbed her hand, and told her to wait because there was something he needed to check. Soo-bin turned to him in surprise, thinking their problem was that they knew each other too well. They could see right through one another. She grew worried that if he met Ji Ye-Jun, her lies would be exposed. But the man kept holding her hand, unwilling to let go. Whether he was curious or suspicious, Kunho always insisted on confirming things himself. Soo-bin pulled her hand free and screamed at him to let go. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Gunho said her boyfriend had arrived and was standing right behind her. She thought it was too soon for him to show up, but then Ji Ye-Jun quietly came up behind her and greeted her affectionately. He walked up with a charming smile, wrapped his arms around her, and asked if she hadn't waited too long. Then he turned to the man standing across from them and suggested he grab someone else's wrist instead and let her go peacefully. Gunho released her hand. The girl thought it was madness. She turned to her ex and declared that this was her boyfriend, the man who would become her husband. Gunho looked devastated, at a loss for words, until his phone suddenly rang. He excused himself and picked up. His professor was calling, so he became distracted with the conversation. While he was on the phone, Ji Ye-Jun leaned down, whispered in her ear, and asked who exactly was going to be her husband. Shocked, she asked what he meant, but he pulled her tightly against him and demanded an answer right then. Did she want to marry him or not? He pressed her again for her answer. The girl fumed inside, wondering what on earth he was doing and why he couldn't see the situation clearly. But he kept holding her close, refusing to let her go. Soo-bin told him this was the worst situation of her life. Thankfully, her ex didn't hear it since he was still on the phone. Ji Ye-Jun just smiled at her and said it was actually the perfect time to force her to speak up. She didn't know what to say. Looking completely crushed, she stood there helpless, unable to decide what to do. She thought to herself that Ji Ye-Jun was the biggest scoundrel in the world, the worst opponent, armed with unmatched manipulation skills. Still, he told her they should get married. Holding her in his arms, he waited for her answer. She stared at him, thinking he was exactly as she had expected, a sly fox who never missed a chance to chase money. Meanwhile, Kung-ho kept talking on the phone, oblivious to what was happening right behind him. Ji Ye-Jun gripped her shoulders and pressed again, asking if she was going to answer him. She looked utterly lost. He pulled her even closer. Soo-bin asked if he was really going to do this, and he said yes. His next move would depend entirely on her answer. She asked what would happen if she didn't respond. He pretended not to understand, but she accused him of playing dumb. She muttered that whoever he was unbearably irritating. Ji Ye-Jun guessed that the man on the phone must be her ex. He glanced at him, standing there with his phone in hand, watching them intently. Ji Ye-Jun demanded that Soo-bin answer before he counted to 3. He wrapped his arms tightly around her shoulders, holding her close, and began to count. 1, pulling her even tighter against him. The man counted 2, but the girl tried to stop him. Kung-ho stood nearby, silently waiting to see what would happen next. When the man said 3, the girl began to resist, shouting loudly that he was a bastard. She added that it was only for a year, and so she would do it. Ji Ye-Jun smiled, pulled her even closer, and said it felt wonderful to hear her agree. After she calmed down a little, he turned her face toward him, leaned in, and kissed her deeply. In that moment, she forgot all her troubles. The girl looked completely lost. The kiss had been unexpected, and a soft trembling spread through her entire body. The man stayed silent, staring at her with piercing eyes. Then Ji Ye-Jun smiled and confessed that he loved her. He turned to Kung-ho, saying that he probably had plenty of other things to do, so they would leave first. Hugging the girl, he reminded her that they were supposed to go to the gopchang restaurant, and if they stayed here any longer, they would miss all the fun. Pretending to be very much in love, he declared that they both adored pork, and the girl gladly went along with the act. Together, they headed to the restaurant. They wished Kung-ho well, telling him to take care and have a safe trip. Left alone, he simply stood there, watching them walk away. When they entered the restaurant, the girl's first order was alcohol. She looked deeply upset, sitting with an empty glass already in her hand. Sitting across from her, the man noticed her confusion and asked why she couldn't seem to collect her thoughts. He said the job was done and reached for food, but the girl's face burned red with anger. Pushing her chair back, she stood up furiously, waving her fists. She shouted that he was about to receive a deadly blow, and that she would finally get rid of him. He told her to look at herself, pointing out she still had the habit of waving her hands around. She screamed back, demanding what exactly he had just said. He argued that he had helped her, yet she was acting like an animal. Hearing that, she grew even angrier. Soo-bin screamed at him, asking how he dared. He teasingly asked if she meant when he kissed her. Laughing nervously, she admitted that maybe it had been necessary after all. She thought to herself that, at least, he hadn't kissed her lips. She replayed the moment in her mind. His hand had partly covered her mouth, and the kiss had landed on her cheek. She still couldn't calm down, but he explained that he had only done it for the sake of the show. She cursed him, calling him vile. He called her stupid, saying she couldn't understand his behavior when he saw her with her ex-boyfriend. He asked if she really thought a man would simply stand by while someone tried to steal his fiancée right in front of him. He explained that her ex would have suspected her, and unless he had seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed her. Ji Ye-Jun poured her another glass of alcohol and asked whether she thought her ex would believe such a lie. She lowered her head in silence. She picked up the full glass, drank, and admitted she couldn't deny it. He was right. After a long pause, Soo-bin said she wanted to believe they had fooled him, but something still troubled her. She stared at the man across from her, watching him calmly eat and somehow try to listen and understand her. She wondered what she should do about the wedding, then drained another glass and ordered another bottle of soju. Sitting in the restaurant, she drank bottle after bottle, trying desperately to forget everything. After 5 bottles of soju, she began laughing, saying she had drunk too much. Then she started shouting at him to leave her alone, but he gently calmed her, telling her she was just a little drunk. The girl suddenly asked how he even had her number. He told her she didn't need to know. It had been easy to get. She called him crazy. She yelled at him, demanding to know if he was still spying on her data. He explained that since she didn't want to talk to him directly, he had chosen a more polite way to reach her. The girl asked when he had become so polite, since he had always criticized people to their faces. He only smiled in response. She asked if she could pose him a question. When he agreed, she asked why he had chosen her. With a smirk, Ji Ye-Jun said not to expect him to admit he liked her, because she wasn't his type. She was surprised. Outraged, she declared that she didn't like him either. He replied that was exactly what he had meant. He said she was simply the best partner for a moderate life and a quiet divorce. Taking a glass, he drank, while she laughed at his words. He added that she was fun to tease, so he wouldn't be bored living with her. Slamming her fist on the table, she shouted that he was a scoundrel and that she wished she could shut his foul mouth. Soo-bin yelled that she'd had enough, stood up, and declared she was going home. He tried to stop her, saying their talk wasn't finished. She shouted that it was already late and that her mother would beat her to death if she didn't get home soon. She tried to leave, but the alcohol overwhelmed her. Her vision darkened, her head spun, and her body weakened. The girl collapsed to the floor. Ji Ye-Jun panicked, asking what had happened and how she felt. The next morning, the girl woke to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. She looked around, confused by the strange ceiling and the unfamiliar place. Glancing around the room once more, she turned toward the bright sunlight streaming in. Then suddenly heard a voice right beside her. It was Ji Ye-Jun, asking how she had slept. She realized with shock that he was lying next to her, watching her now that she was awake. He yawned, pretending he hadn't slept well, while she stared at him in panic, unable to understand what was happening. Soo-bin couldn't grasp why she was in his bed, then quickly pulled back the blanket to check. The man tried to doze off again, but she yanked the blanket over herself and screamed in horror, asking how this could have happened. He asked what she meant. Looking at him lying naked beside her, she demanded to know why he wasn't wearing clothes. He answered casually that he simply couldn't sleep dressed. With a trembling voice, she asked if they had slept together. Smiling at her terrified face, he told her that, as she could see, they had. Wow, honestly, this manga just keeps getting deeper and more intense. I can't stop thinking about Soo-bin and Ji Ye-Jun. Everything from their past misunderstandings to these complicated emotions is just... wow. What I love the most is how real their struggles feel. Soo-bin's determination to pay off her debt, her pride, and yet her vulnerability. It makes her such a relatable and strong heroine. And Ji Ye-Jun, his actions might seem cold at first, but you can feel his loyalty, his love for his grandmother, and his complicated past shaping every decision he makes. The dynamics between them are fascinating. There's tension, a little frustration, and so much unspoken attraction that keeps you guessing. And then there's Ji Ye-Jun stepping in, adding even more chaos and unpredictability. It's exactly the kind of drama that makes you wonder what's coming next. Will Soo-bin finally give in to her feelings? How will Ji Ye-Jun react when things get even messier? The story is full of surprises, and I honestly can't wait to see how their relationships evolve. If you love romance mixed with tension, emotional depth, and a little bit of mischief, this manga is definitely one to follow. And don't worry, there's so much more to come. I'm already hooked, and I know you will be too. So stay tuned, because the next chapters are going to be absolutely thrilling.